Hi everyone, my name is Dan Thronström and I work at Amplifier Game Invest. I'm super happy to be here at Konsoll, even though we're filming now from home in my little office here. I'm super happy to be here, and today we're going to talk about how you can make a good pitch. And pitches are something that we see a lot in my company, since what we do is invest in companies. So we probably see a few hundred pitches each year. So today I wanted us to go through what we're kind of looking for and what I think is important in a pitch. So hopefully give you some hints and some tips on how this could be done. And I'm more than happy to answer your questions in the end via email after the entire presentations. So let's get going. Making pitch decks are quite hard because they need a lot of preparation. I would say that it takes a lot of time to put together a really, really good pitch. And the reason for that is that you have to have all the data there before you actually start laying out the presentation and finding good narrative for me to understand when I read it through without your help. So it takes a lot of time and preparations. There might be images, there might be videos, a text, and it needs to come together in a nice presentation. So it will take a lot of time to do it properly, I would say, at least. Also, the deck needs to stand on its own. You're not going to be there usually when I get the pitch deck, right? I get a presentation. So if you have a meeting, you have the chance to jump in and explain to me some of the holes that I might miss. But if I only get the presentation itself, it actually means that everything needs to be contained. And that's something that you have to foresee, that I can't read your mind. I'm not a mind reader. I can't read your mind from exactly how you want the game to work or feel, or to know more about your company. So everything needs to be combined in the presentation, and that is something that actually takes a lot of practice to make that happen. Also, I would also say that it's not only about the presentation itself, like the data in it, as we said before as well, that it is important that it looks really good, because your job is to inspire and motivate me to take contact with you once the presentation is done and I've read it. So what is actually the goal with a pitch deck? Some people, I think, sometimes feel that it's supposed to introduce the company and the game, and for me just to take a decision right there and then that this is all the information I need and now I'm going to invest my money, either if it's a publisher in the project or if it's an investor in your company. But it's not really that. I think the most important thing is that you need to spark curiosity to start a conversation. Once I've received the presentation, I've read it through, I want to contact you, I want to talk to you. Hey, I want to figure out what's behind this company, what's behind this game, like what would your thought process. So it's more about the kick-starting something, it's not ending something. Another thing is also that it needs to cover the basic information about your game and or your studio. So I have all the information to make a right move, to speak to my colleagues, so I can actually contact you and say, hey, I think these people have something really interesting, maybe we should reach out to them. It also shows you, or shows me, I would say more, that you've done your homework, that you've actually crunched the numbers, that you have thought about the game, you've thought about how you would structure the pitch to me. So I look a lot into the structure of the presentation itself to see how orderly are you. Is this something you're just trying to shoot out to different publishers and investors, or have you actually looked it through and really did some good crafting on the presentation itself? And it also shows the structure and organization of, can you put this into a very, very small presentation, because we have a hard time with long presentations. You will also probably bloat it yourself, so it needs to be quite compact. So we looked at structure. Do you have your things in order? So I usually say that you need to see the pitch deck as an application for a job. Remember, you first send in your application, then you get called for an interview. So this is the very first step. It's not the last step of a conversation, it's the first step. Also, it is super important that you need to know who your reader is. And for an investor, it might be me. And for a publisher, it's of course someone else. but you need to know who you're sending this information to, who you're sending this deck to, and what they're going to read into your presentation. And that actually takes a lot of homework. And we've seen that before. We've received a lot of, hey, we would like to have an investment or in our project, and our company only invests in companies or in game companies, so we don't really do project-based funding. So that deck is probably not really right for us, but could probably easily be changed and customized so it's more relevant to us. And of course, it would be more for a publisher as well, tweaking it that way. And there's a few things that you can think about this. So publisher investors, they're actually looking for different things. Publishers primarily look for project investments. They're going to invest in your project and not your company. They might still look for a long-term partnership with you and your studio, but they're looking at the game first and maybe the team behind it to see if the game can be made. For us as investors, we're investing in the company long-term, maybe for 10, 20, 30 years. So for us, we're looking at different things. For us, the team and the company structure and the great, interesting ideas, they just mix a little bit different. We read into different things. So try to understand who am I actually sending this to, especially if it is publishers or investors. I mentioned this before early on. We see a few hundred pitches each year. And one of the things and a big recommendation I would do is actually say that make it easy to read the material in your pitch and have a strong early hook. I personally, what I do is when I get a PDF or a pitch, I actually scroll through the entire presentation during the first 30 seconds once I've opened it, just to see what am I looking at, where is what's here, is there any sections that I'm missing, like a budget or anything, and then I go back to the first page again and then look it through. But in many cases, maybe your pitch only gets 1 or 2 minutes. And if it doesn't have that hook that makes me interested, people might actually close it and say, sorry, we're not going to have that first discussion or first phone call that we spoke about in the earlier slide. So remember, it needs to be easy to read material. It needs to be airy and functional. I think that I actually have a pitch about that. You need to catch my interest fast. Because we see so many pitches each year. We dipped into this a little bit before. Understand who you're addressing. Publisher investors, we also have different focuses. I mean, if you would compare THQ Nordic with Paradox, they also work within different genres, right? So Paradox is more focused on strategies. So if you have a first-person shooter, maybe that is not the first publisher that you should contact regarding your game if it is a first-person shooter. So instead of just blasting every single publisher or investor, on the market with your deck, make sure that you're aiming and targeting the right ones, because those are the publisher investors that you want to focus your time on. The other ones would probably just come back and say, I'm sorry, we don't invest in that platform, we don't invest in that genre, or whatever it might be. So genres, platforms, and budgets, I mean budget sizes, are something that you can actually contact them and ask them, how it fits, or read on their homepage. Many publishers and investors say pretty much what they're looking for and what kind of sizes or sizes and budgets they can actually handle. This, I know, might sound a little bit silly, but this is about formats and documents that we get sent over. I love when everything is done in either PowerPoint or Google Slides. That's totally fine, because we want to be able to have a deck-based format. But please always save it out as a PDF, because it's super easy for us to open. Everyone can pretty much open a PDF, and it's very, very easy for us to share it internally with the rest of our colleagues and our teams. So have a PDF, format that, or save it as a PDF in the end and send it to us, because then we can view it offline as well. I think this is one of the hardest one, I would say, is trying to create flow. And I've made probably a few hundred pitches, and I've seen many more. And what I'm trying to coach for the studios that we work with is to create flow in your presentation. And I mean a lot of things with that, but primarily it is that your presentation needs to have a narrative. need to have thought it through, just like a piece of music or a movie. What are you trying to say, and when do you say it, and what things lead from one to another, so they kind of dock into each other in a very clear and natural way. So if you have different sections, and we're going to talk about that later, like game and product and budget and team, you try to ease them into each other so it's way easier to follow the information. Also, making sure that the pitch is not too busy. Even if you can cram in a bunch of text into every single page because you want it there, it doesn't mean that it's good. I think that I actually prefer more airy, more light presentations that I can easily see things in the presentation. It could be using keywords or colors or something that draws my attention to different parts of the screen, but just don't cram things into a PowerPoint slide. It makes it very, very hard to follow. I would also say that the length is important. Many presentations that we get are very long. They could be 20, 30, 40 slides long when you actually start getting the entire backstory and almost a full game design document in a pitch, and that's simply too long. And I know that a lot of people at publisher investors would simply just close your presentation after 2 minutes because they know that I will never get through this. So it's super important to make it short and snappy. If you feel that a slide doesn't deserve to be there or it's too much information, there probably is. So remove that one because you're trying to create curiosity from people like me. So I'm trying to see what is good in your presentation. And sometimes less is better. Because I will have 1,000 questions anyway, right? In an interview or in a call, and a follow-up call. So I'm going to write down all my feedback and all my questions. So you will have that all that information. You just simply don't have to put it up front in the presentation. I recommend that you use visual references, images, preferably your own art if you have. If not, make sure that you clearly state that these are references. Everyone can approach an image and understand, or at least see what it is, and you can explain what I'm looking at. If it is a style of gameplay, or if it is a visual style, or lighting, or you're drawing reference from books or movies or other games. I think it's a really, really good thing to use because then we start kind of pick up on things instead of trying to explain it in only words. So I love when people use references, visual references or video clips or something like that to make me hone into what they're trying to tell me. So these are all talking about creating that flow through the deck and the presentation using different tool sets. So now I'm more going into the structure of a pitch, and I'm going to use kind of a made-up example that I made, so it's probably not the best thing that I've ever done. But looking at the structure of a pitch and things that I believe that you should have in a pitch and the reason for them. So this is just a list in kind of the order that I would like to see them. So we have an elevator pitch, we have a brief background on the theme and the setting, we have core mechanics and game pillars, we have an analysis of target audience and a market fit, basic information about the product, which sounds a little bit odd because everything is very descriptive except for basic information, but we'll get to that. Also look in production and budget, presenting your team, and the super important thing, you have to have a slide to actually tell us what are you asking for, what are you looking for, and we're going to talk about that later as well. So I made up this little game that I'm just going to use as an example for each of these slides, so you can see an example of how I would like to see it. I'm not saying that it's the perfect way, but it's a way that I've really appreciated pitches that were built up in this kind of way because it gives us a good flow throughout the presentation of the game, and you're touching on different sections and subjects of it. So let's get started with that. So elevator pitch. something that everyone talks about. What is an elevator pitch? And I guess it's supposed to be back in the day where if you happen to run into someone important in an elevator at the games conference and they say, hey, what do you work with? What kind of game? You kind of have like 15-20 seconds to just blurt out of what you're doing. And that's the kind of elevator pitch, because you only have 15 seconds to travel a few floors. So it is a short and a compressed, focused description of the game and the product that you're making. And also, like I say here, it's what you would say to someone if you were at a game conference after work or whatever, and they would say, hey, okay, so what's your studio about, and what kind of game are you making? And it happens quite a lot that you run into publishers, investors in these kind of things, and then it's really, really good to have this elevator pitch nearby and actually learn it and have it by heart and just be able to blurt it out when you get this question. So I have an example here. So this is the kind of the game that we're going to work with. So the example here is like Project Skyline. I have no name. So Project Skyline is a single-player, third-person adventure with a focus on sabotage game mechanics set in a World War II, where the main protagonist needs to use her wits, gadgets, stealth in order to disrupt the enemy occupation of her hometown. So it's quite a long sentence, but I'm trying to pack in a lot of things here. We got single player in there. It's a third person. It's an adventure part. So I'm trying to build up, some kind of image in the listener's head. We're focusing on sabotage game mechanics, okay, so we know kind of what we're leaning into. Are we spying? Are we destroying things? Is this guerrilla warfare? Set during World War II, okay, people can relate to that at least because there's many games about it, but also movies and a lot of in our pop culture or culture. There's a main protagonist. Actually, in my case, I actually used a female protagonist here because I thought it would be really cool and a little bit different here. So I have this keyword, wits, gadgets, and stealth, right? I'm trying to explain how we want the player to feel and how we want to play the game to disrupt the enemy occupation in our hometown. And here I felt hometown was good because I don't want it to be we're going to invade Berlin, we're going to save Berlin. It's like this is a rural village somewhere on the French countryside or something like that. So it's a very, very personal, very close to home. So this is the elevator pitch. It's quite focused and sometimes it could be very single player third person adventure, but it's meant to be very, very compressed to explain something very quickly and maybe spark an interest, because the next question would be, oh, tell me more about this. So that's the elevator pitch, and I usually would like to see that as like the second slide of a pitch, so I can already try to build an image in my mind. What will the rest of the presentation be about? So we're here about the basic information that I mentioned before that just sounds so like boring compared to everything else. But it is important, and these are some of the basic information that I would like to see. What genre is the game in? What is the intended target platforms? What is the base price? And we will come back to that a little bit later, why I think it's important. Total development time, a budget. Do you have an intended publisher? Have you already signed with a publisher? Because maybe you're talking to an investor, but you already have some contacts. But who do you want to approach in this case? So in our game here, I think it's an action adventure in a historical setting. That's kind of the genre here. I'm looking for PC and PS5. The base price I kind of set at $29.99, and I'm just going to say that now, and we're going to go back to it when we talk about production and the budget. Development time is 27th month. I've done some calculations on it, so I will show it later, but at least people who read this now kind of see, okay, it's going to be 30 euros, 27 months. The next step is budget. I've calculated to about 1.5 million euros. So already I've told them about the game already a little bit in the elevator pitch, and now I'm just trying to show them the cost side, the production side over here without going into detail. So I'm prepping them for the next steps. And then intended publishers, the THQ Nordic, Kofstein Publishing, why not? They are a great publisher, so maybe I want to talk to them. So core mechanics and core pillars is the next part that I think is a good step. We have now done the elevator pitch, we've done the basic information. Now I would like to know more about what makes this game click, what makes this game interesting. So here we answer questions. We try to answer questions about, you know, what the player does, what does the game revolve around, are there any loops, and like is the player actually going to do most of the time, and try to do it in a few sections here. And I think this is important because everything else is, you know, just going to make the game nicer, but what is the primary core of the game? And this can be very touchy-feely. It's like, you know, the player experience from emotional perspective, but it can also be something that is very, very, you know, from a mechanics perspective in the game. This is exactly how it's going to work. So I've made up a few core pillars or core mechanics that I think would fit the game that we had in mind. And so you can see this in green. So my idea is still about, you know, we have this French village, and we have this female protagonist who is trying to muster, you know, to rally people around the resistance here. And how do we do that? Well, so we have a loop here where we want to have this little mini open world village where we know some people, but we also know that some people might be traitors, but we also have, you know, enemy troops and enemy officers mingling around. So it's this interesting melting pot, because some are afraid and some people are very happy, and we still have these military forces. So for me, it's like about collecting information, and that's like the first part in the little loop here. Collecting information by stealing, by infiltrating, snooping around. We can bribe people. We can listen at doors. We can maybe get a job at the, you know, the enemy camp or whatever. But that's collecting information. And the second thing is then we're going to use our guerrilla warfare. We're going to have that information, make a plan, and then we're going to execute these ambushes. And that could be assassinating officers, blowing up train tracks, keeping allied soldiers safe. So I'm trying once again to build a story here, right? We're collecting information, then we're using guerrilla warfare, and I'm using quite action verbs here to say that these can all be interaction moments. When we've executed a plan, we can grow their resistance. We need to upgrade our weapons, upgrade our equipment. We can recruit new people to join us. And then I have this fourth pillar, which I thought was interesting, is actually saying that the time is limited. So you only have like a month, and maybe you have a night and day cycle. And after 30 days, the allied troops will actually come in there. If you haven't prepared at all, if you haven't been successful, maybe that allied assault will not be successful at all. But you can play this multiple times and play it in different ways and solve these kind of social puzzles. And what happens if you didn't blow up the bridge, or did you blow up the bridge? What happened then? So once again, going back, I mean, the game that we're presenting is not really interesting in itself, but it's trying to convey these core mechanics and core pillars and what they need for your games. And I think we have 4 quite strong ones here that, in my mind, right, because when you present this to me, in my mind, I need to connect them and go, I think this is interesting. This would be an interesting game. I can see this in front of me. I want to talk more to you about it. So dropping these hints and, you know, try to motivate and inspire me and try to picture this amazing game in my head. That's your job here, from the core mechanics and core pillars that is more in depth than the elevator pitch. Okay? So let's move on. So, as we've said, we've done the elevator pitch. We have now done the basic information. We talked about core mechanics and game pillars. And now I think it's the time to talk a little bit more about the background, the theme, the setting, the visual art, the visual style guides, and those kind of things. Okay, where is this world? Like, where do we play? And I see a lot of pitches that confuses me sometimes. They are either a design document from finish to end, and I don't want to read that because it would give me a lot of detail but not giving me an overview perspective of the game itself. And sometimes I see a lot of pitches that start with a very, very, very heavy story background. And for me, personally, I think that's a bit too heavy. I'm super interested in story and narrative, but I first need to understand where the game is. So I think that's why I put brief background on theme, setting, and game world and narrative here a little bit later in the presentation when I kind of have eased into the game itself. So here you can use text, audio, video, more reference images that I mentioned before. You need to help me see this in front of me. So I recommend using a lot of images. And of course, if you have a concept artist, or you can get a consultant concept artist, that's really good, because then it's clearly your own vision. You're not just referring to certain things. I haven't had the luxury, so in my example with our World War II resistance game here, I've just taken images from the internet that kind of tries to lend a hand explaining what I'm looking for. The female protagonist, we want this silencer gun that looks amazing, and then we have the Enigma coder, and we're blowing up tracks, and it's about camaraderie and sticking together. And I just love this house here with, the sunflowers in front of it, and this French village. So I'm trying to tell a story here, how we can have a strong female character working together with other people, building a resistance against this enemy here. And I try to have this collage to help things forward. And maybe this is a good thing for me to say as well. I mean, now that when we're walking through the structure, we're actually, I'm using 6 or 7 slides to explain this. Of course, you can be a bit bolder. If you keep to within 15 slides, that's totally fine. If you want to talk about theme setting and game worlds on 3 slides, that's totally fine. Here I think I'm explaining the entire game in the structure in about 5 slides, but of course you're allowed to bloat a little bit more here. But this is what I mean. This kind of helps sets the tone of the pitch and presentation, because you're still trying to get me as an observer to paint a picture of the game that you want to make. Now we kind of leave the game part of it. I always talk about game and product, where game is more the player experience, and product is actually where we're trying to sell this game and who it fits, right? That could be pricing, that could be a lot of what competition you have on the market. So now we kind of left the game part a little bit. Now we're talking about how will we actually make money on this, and how can we make sure that there's someone that wants to buy it and play it. So we have target audience and market analysis here, and the target audience is primarily about who will play your game. Who are you trying to get to play the game and get to buy your game? And sometimes you just need to dig into this. Sometimes people use personas to create this template, kind of this image of who would our players be. So you have to kind of use questions here to answer, what games do they play? Do they have any interest outside of gaming? How do they play a game? Is it single player, multiplayer games? Do they play puzzle games, adventure games? Are they more towards the emotional engaging games like Last of Us, or are they more into Fortnite, just go in and play a session and then play it over and over? And what's important for them? And I think that's very important from your game perspective, that you need to go in and say, who is this game for? Because those are the people that you need to attract. And sometimes you actually have to go back to your design, change a few things to just make sure that it's a little bit wider than you thought, because it is much harder creating a niche by yourself, because the market there in that niche is quite small, and you might have to open it up a little bit. But that's something that we would like to see, that that you have thought about it, who are we actually aiming for? And the other part of this is actually looking at what market the game fits in. What are the competitors there? Are there opportunities there? Is there something that your game is changing or innovating that other games have not so far? Or are they more similar to the big hits? And I think that this is also very much something that you have to think about, because there is this fallacy of just because Call of Duty and Battlefield are amazingly successful with millions and millions and millions sold copies, especially in the franchise, probably in the hundreds of millions. It is because they sell so well, we're going to make a first-person shooter game with 64 players, and then they fail, and you ask why, or they ask why, and because they already, the customers are already there. They're playing Battlefield and Call of Duty. Why would they play your game? So from our perspective, in this kind of slide or this kind of part of the pitch, it is important that you do your homework to tell us, how is your game different? Is there a slot in the market that is quite empty and undisturbed, and we know there's customers asking for this specific game or game style? So this is where we want you to explain to us, like, how have you done this? Have you done a competitive analysis, on the market, or to see which one you're close to and which one you're far away, and like, in what way does your game innovate or become unique, and why would people stop playing a certain game and play yours? So this is more data driven, but it's something that you need to do. It is important for us because this is more on our side, where we start looking at the game itself and seeing how can we invest in this and actually sell, so you can make money and we can make money. And this is a business, and that's also what we're trying to do, even though we love all games. So the example here is that I did this very briefly, to be fair. So I did like players that enjoy stealth, tactics, action, puzzle, and historical events. That kind of feels like what we're aiming for here. I did some references here to like Commandos 2 and Company of Heroes 2 and that franchise. Now these are played top down, and so these are a little bit different. But what I thought about the feeling of playing as squads or trying to be disruptive, because many of these, these two games kind of have a lot of levels and a lot of scenarios based around that. I took in Last of Us here more because I in my mind at least wanted to have like an emotional part of the game as well. I want this young female protagonist to be able to, something is invading their hometown, like their home. So it needs to be emotional. You need to be able to see that there are people in the village that you trusted before the invasion that now have turned sides. So there's a little bit of treachery, and there might be traitors around, and you're building up this camaraderie also with the rest of the resistance, people that you knew from school, or entire new people. So there's a story part that I think is important there, and that's why I mention it. Dishonored I brought up here because I think there's a multiple way of solving a lot of the puzzles and a lot of the scenarios and levels in that game, and that's kind of what I'm looking at for like in this game as well. It's like you should be able to replay it and play around with it and experiment and do that. One thing that I haven't done here that I actually usually recommend is when you do references like I've done here with Commandos, Company of Heroes, Last of Us 2 and Dishonored, is actually write a small paragraph what it is you want to refer to, what it is why you mentioned it, because you might mean the art style from The Last of Us, but what I'm looking for is the story. So it can be quite interesting to see these things. Also, when it comes to market analysis, I see that a lot of companies, what they're doing on studios, they're actually taking games that are quite similar to the games that you want to make, and you look at when they were released, look at how those games reviewed and how much they've sold, and I think that's very, very good to do that. If you do that, make sure that you don't pick the unicorns, right? So if you have a game about crafting, you don't have to bring up Minecraft and say, look, they have sold bazillions units, and because that is a very, very special case, I would say. And I think that's what I would mean with unicorns, something that is actually just broke or genre breaking or created new genres and being something that actually is on the very, very pinnacle of their genre. And I think it's then take something that is closer to you, that is a little bit modest and a little more humble, than taking these things that exploded. We have Flappy Birds that sold gazillions also, but I don't think that you want to mention that specific game if you're making a Flappy Birds clone, because it's already been made. If I make sense here. So if you're referring to things with sales and reviews, to show that there is an audience for it and the market is hungering for it, and it's probably possible to sell this in a good way, please do. But make it smart. Just don't try to sell the unicorns to us. Even maybe more far away from the game itself, we're talking about production budget and sales. Now, this can be quite complex, and this is not a presentation about how to make a budget or a production timeline or roadmaps. So here I'm actually just mentioning that what we're looking for here is actually production phases, team sizes, and costs. And this can be very overview, abstract information that makes kind of sense, but maybe not in super detail, and that's fine. But just by the presentation that I've done here on this specific this specific slide, I get a lot of information. So, for example, you can see that in the table on the top, I've divided my production timeline here into 4 different parts: a concept, a pre-production, production, and post-production phases. Each of them actually also has a time connected to it, so it's going to be 3 months, then 6 months, 12 months, and 6 months. So already here we know that I'm looking at a project that's about 27 months, if I've done the math correctly here. I've also then continued to specify how many people I think is going to be in the team for each of these phases. So it's 5, 10, 15, and 8. So I know that there's a ramp up and a ramp down as an investor and publisher, and this is what we want to see, because you can't just have a full team from the beginning. Usually, I would say that. I've also associated a cost to each of the concept, or each of the phases here, and in this case, I've just said that one person costs 5,000 euros per month, just to make it easy. So we can see how much each of the phases cost, and we can also actually have a total budget for this. And this is the development budget. It is not QA, not localization, not anything else. This is just development costs. And I get around 1.5 million euros for this. My target is to start in January, and I'm going to do this for 27 months, and hopefully we can be done in Q4 or for release in 2023. The target price here is $29.99. I just made that up, but I think target price is something that I would like to discuss quite early on in a pitch or in a discussion with the studio. And the reason for that is that for me, the target price or the product they're trying to make is like an empty bucket. And the bigger the target price is, the bigger the bucket. And you need to fill that bucket with content and quality. And it is way harder to fill a bucket that should be worth $69.99 on the market than to make a product that is $29.99. So I like to discuss the target price, and it could be changed. That's totally fine. That could be changed, but I would like to see how big is the bucket and compare that to, can the team that we're going to talk about in the next slide fill this bucket with content and quality within this time that we've spoken for. So $29.99 sounds pretty good. It's not going to be a huge game, but not a small game either. So maybe it's like AA, a little bit back. I'm going to focus on quality here. I did a fast calculation here. Don't judge me on this. That maybe we're looking at a break even at about 27,000 units. I've just taken the target price, taken the entire budget, removed 30% of the platform holder, and just seen what we have here. And the break-even says 72,000 units. And then I like to see if you just put in a 2x and 3x the budget, just to see how much you would have to. So if it's twice the budget, it's going to be 3 million. And that means that you have to do about 145,000 units here. And these numbers do not need to be exact. For me, it's just help me along. We crunch number all the time, so something that you shouldn't do is actually make up numbers or fake the math in it, because we will see it. For me, this is just information that I would like to see, because it also means that you've done your homework and you know what you're doing. Is this interesting? You're just helping me not do the calculations that I would have to do in a few minutes anyway, but it's just nice to see. And by the end of the day, what I kind of look at is saying, let's see if we're aiming for 3x the budget sales here, 216,000 units. What I'm trying to figure out is, can you guys make a product here? that can sell 216,000 units on your first game? That's what I'm trying to find out. And or is there any way that we can do that together to make sure it sells that? Is that an impossible number, or is it a probable number, or is it something that, yeah, you know, we can probably do that? It just helps out a little bit. And so just this single this single slide tells a lot of information, and I think it's important for you to have it because it shows that you've thought about it, not only developing the game, but also how will we develop the game, how much will it cost, what are we looking for. Okay, so we're kind of closing the end here. Now I want to hear more about you and your team. So what we're looking at here is the company and the team. We might differ a little bit here from publishers to investor. I think we're both very interested in the company and the team itself, because we're both gonna, you know, hopefully work with you and gonna see like who are we actually gonna work with, and what kind of help can we, you know, can we give you. And I think that one thing that stands out a little bit is about ownership of the company itself. As an investor, since we're investing for equity in the company, it's more important for us to know just, do you have 5 owners, 50 owners? Do you have VCs that are come in earlier on that we would like to buy out? Those kind of things. Other than that, it's kind of the same between the publisher and the investor here. You know, year founded, who founded it, you know, why did you found it? Have you developed titles before, or is this your first title? Now, I'm going to pause there for a second because I think it's important that, you know, we've invested in studios that have never released a game before, and that's totally fine. So I think that if you haven't released titles before, I think it's more interesting to hear about what are you going to develop, what games are you looking forward to do, what is your vision and mission, like who do you want to be in, you know, 4 to 5 years. And I think focus on that and why you want to be the company that you're aiming to be, because we all need to start somewhere, and so that's totally fine. Even though you haven't developed any titles before, then it's fine. But if you have done it, we would really like to see it. Also, if there's any games that you specialize on, and I think that's more genres, if you're more aimed towards strategy or car games or first-person shooters, I mean, it just helps us understand what you're trying to do. If the game that you're pitching to us is aligned with the learnings and experiences that you've had before, or is this, you know, something new we want to try, which is also totally fine. We just need to kind of know about it. Where you're located, I think is interesting. Now, I mean, I'm here in Stockholm talking to people from all over the world, so I think it has changed a little bit. But for us, it's just interesting. Where are you located? Especially for us at Amplifier, we work very, very closely with our teams, so we would like to visit quite often, and then it's easier for us if you're closer by. We've already covered the ownership and the investors, but also try to like inspire us and motivate us. Why should we talk to you and your company? What makes it special? Do you have a special culture? Do you have a special team? Like what do you have that makes your company and team click? And I think that's super interesting, and I always like to hear about that. And we already mentioned the company vision. That could be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. So where do you want to be? Do you want to be the next DICE? Do you want to be the next Paradox? Or do you want to go your own route? But where are you heading? As I think it's super important and super interesting for us. And when you talk about your team, please present your team. I mean, it's way easier if you have, of course, a team that is like, 10, 15 people. That is easier than if you have 20, 30, 40 people. But in those cases, you pick the key roles in each company or in each team. But please do it with picture, and please, by name, by role, and where they've been before, if they have previous experience, if they worked, in other different companies, or if they worked in a different field, like movies or anything like that, that has, some interest that can translate with the games. And I always like LinkedIn links, so I can, in the presentation, so I can just click on a link and just see their CV and see where they've been before. I think that's super, super important. And then it was the question that we had from the beginning that I think is super, super important as well. I mean, everything is super important in this presentation apparently, but a lot of people forget about this. They have spoken about their game. They've spoken about their their teams. They've done production. They have done their budgets. They've done all of this, and then kind of you end and say thank you, like this one. It just says final words here. Sorry, usually it just says thank you. And I think what a lot of people are missing here is actually you need to tell us what you want. And a lot of people miss that. Like, what are you looking for? Are you looking for an investor or a publisher? Or are you looking for a long-term, partnership? So I just mentioned if you are looking for a long-term partnership, is it a project or is it an investment that you're looking for? Do you need help with PR, marketing, localization, and QA, and things like that? And so you're trying to speak to me specifically also, like, why do you want to work with me? Because I think that's very important. We're all humans, and just creating one presentation to send to everyone that is not customized or is not, at least a little bit changed depending on who is the receiver, I think is less good. I think it's because then you're just doing a shotgun approach and you're hoping that anyone would kind of catch it. So I think that this kind of what you're asking for might differ from who you're contacting. But I think it's super important that you actually write it down. Like, what are you looking for in the long term? What are you looking for help? Because if what you don't tell us, we don't know. Right, as we said in the beginning, we're not mind readers. So I think it's important that you actually clearly state that this is what we're looking for. So a few final words. We've been going on for quite a while here now. Maybe not in any specific order. Remember to customize your pitch for the reader. Make it interesting and bite-sized. Remember, this is the start of a conversation. It's not the end of a conversation. Make sure that you show the different parts here of your project. So you have your game, your team, your product, your opportunities, your budgets. You need to have that narrative that we spoke about. That try to show each, like pieces of a pie or a piece of a cake. You don't have to show everything in the first pitch, but you need to be able to show that you have thought about everything, at least. Also, be inspiring, but also be grounded. So what I mean with that is think big and say what you want to do, but also make sure that you have the data information to be actually to build upon it. That you say, like, we're going to be able to do it because we have this team and we have this technology and this experience. We'll be able to do it, and we have great talents and we have this great idea that we think that we fit together, and we've never missed a deadline or whatever it might be. Be inspiring. Like, I would say like 95% of everyone who works in this industry love games, and we at Amplifier, we are true gamers and we love games so much. So we love to click on a pitch to see, like, hopefully it's something that is groundbreaking, hopefully something that inspires us, and we found so many games that does, and we've always called them back and say, hey, what do you want to do? How can we make this happen? So try to be motivating and inspiring, and because we want to join you on the ride. That's it. Make sure that you have that narrative and that flow throughout the presentation. Make sure that if you move from one section to other, it feels natural. That I was just about to ask about that, and you kind of have that deck already. And maybe my examples wasn't super great, as I said, because I only have like 5 slides, and yours will be 15 slides, so you will have more time to actually show different things in your presentation, to give a little bit more room for things. But make sure that you have that flow, and also that you understand that it's not just the information, it's how it's presented. It needs to go hand in hand. It's quite easy to see a presentation that looks amazing, but there's not really anything carrying it. It looks amazing, but someone hasn't done their homework. It's quite easy to see that. And it's quite easy to see also that you have a presentation, or where you see a presentation filled with data, and the data is really good. It's just not very impressive how it's been laid out, or the visual references or like that, because we know that we kind of look at these things and we see, if we take these shortfalls to actually producing the game, will we see the same problems there? We don't know, but that's something we're looking at. So, we've been talking for, I don't know how long here, for a long time about pitching. There are no final super answers for how to pitch your game. I just hope that there's been a few insights into what I see in a good pitch and how you can think about it, and what I think about when I actually help our studios create pitches to publishers. It takes a long time, and I think it's good to actually have some dry runs to send presentations to someone that has done the similar thing that you know might not be interested at all in it, but just like, hey, can you just have a look at it for 5 minutes and just see how it is? Like, would you change anything? And we do that quite often as well. So it's good to do some A/B testing to test it around. So if you have any questions, please, here's my email. You're more than welcome to contact me. And I hope to see some really cool pitches. Thank you.